in the red hot, yeah, she got for sale. Hot smells in the red hot, yeah, she got for sale. Hold on. Down the coffee. Put down the coffee before you make a mess. There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Tennessee Fats. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the library, and welcome to my desk. Welcome to episode 6 of the Tennessee Fats Library podcast. Now, I guess it's fairly obvious by the fact that I just said number 6. I've already recorded 5 of these. And I'll tell you, in doing these, one of the things that I wanted to do was really dive into the books. Really dive into the stories, dive into the lore, and really just have a talking point where I can sit without worrying about producing a big YouTube video that's going to get lots of views and babbledy algorithm this and that, and just produce a podcast. For those of us who like Conan, sword and sorcery, some sort of horror to a minor level, and really just talk about the books. One of the things I discovered, though, in reviewing the last bunch of podcast episodes is that I've been really typing a hell of a lot in getting these things ready. And that has been exhausting. Hold on a second. Well, moving the chair up. For those of you who are listening to this instead of watching the YouTube video, I am now moving the world's squeakiest chair. The amount of typing and the prep work that's going into these things is making them, what would be the word I would use here? I'm going to go with problematic. Yeah, let's go with that. Like, for example, the last one which did, which is about the Red Sonja Consumed story. That thing was huge. Like, when I looked at my actual Word document that I was reading from and going through the dialogue in there, that was 28 pages. And it made for an incredibly long adventure. Well, great story. I really liked it. And quite frankly I like the material that we covered. But the issue here, hold on a second, is that when I'm looking at it now, I'm like, that was a hell of a lot of really dry just diving into the material. And if you really want to dive into the material, I imagine most people would just dive into reading the material. I don't think that's really what I wanted to do here. And that's why this one is the first podcast we're going to record that's somewhat different. This is going to be done more in line with what I would do in one of my hot takes at the desk videos that I do on my regular channel, which is a sister channel to this, on YouTube, that is. Not necessarily on all the podcast platforms where this is available. We're going to sit and we're going to just have a chat. I have taken an entirely different tack here, and I've got out my notebook. And this is the notebook that I do when I'm preparing notes for all of my videos on the regular channel. And I have filled it with pages of written text, some of which we're going to refer back to as we're going, but most of this was just as a review process for me. So, admin out of the way, you now know how we're approaching this somewhat differently. Let's actually get into the podcast. Okay, part 1. What the hell are we talking about today? Well, I'll tell you what we're talking about today. I am talking about this wonderful story by Tim Lebbon, and I'm holding it up in front of the camera because I'm so used to YouTubing. For you who are on the podcast, the Tim Lebbon story, Conan Songs of the Slain. This one does have some illustrations in it, and just as far as admin goes, the copy that I'm reading from today, or that I have read, that I'm talking about today, is the first edition, which I believe came out in, July of 2025. For those of you who are wondering about the actual book, because I don't read softcover. Sorry, I do read softcover. I don't read electronic format books. This is as physical as it gets. This is full-blown hardcover, and the first edition that came out of this was only hardcover as an option, so ergo, that's why we got this. This has some really interesting illustrations in it. I really enjoy. There's one, for example, in here, just for those of you who are thinking about picking it up, I haven't picked it up as of yet. There's an illustration in here of the older King Conan sneaking his way out of his own capital city in disguise, which I think is just a fantastic image, and it really evokes just the moodiness that is Conan's story. It was really a lot of fun going through this and finding those images as we go. So if you're thinking about picking up a copy, I can tell you this one's a good one. All right. Enough of that crap out of the way. Let's talk about the story itself. Now, as normal on these, what we're going to do is do a couple different takes on this. So there's normal sections within this. We've already done part 1, which is what do we talk about. Part 2 is going to be what's the story and who are the characters that are involved. And unlike where I normally go through the entire story beginning to end with all the little nuances, I'm going to jump around a lot on this and really just try to make it a little quicker for you guys. We're going to dive into the characters, where the characters come from, how they interact, and really the overall arc. There is a massive cataclysmic battle that ends this book. And I am going to steer as far clear of that as possible for you guys so I don't ruin it. because if you haven't read it and you're listening to this just to get a synopsis, that would be kind of a jackass thing for me to do. So we're not going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through the characters, the stories, and get there. And then we'll come back to this one at the end of it with the normal pieces that we include, which are going to include part 3, which is what are the themes that are involved in this? What sort of major items jump out of it, like literary themes. Then we'll talk about archaic language. That's usually a good one. We're not going to really get into that today because there is no archaic language in this book. And finally, we'll come back with final thoughts and suggestions for further readings. And that's basically how we're going to run through this. Okay, part 2. Okay, so what is the story here? Well, I'll tell you what the story is. Effectively, this is a tale of an older King Conan having to go on one hell of a ramshackle adventure while going through some deep psychological, I guess, baggage that he's carrying to get to this final massive violent conclusion. And the only reason he's doing this is because he's fulfilling his word to a friend. But is that really the only reason why he's doing this? Valid question. The story starts off talking about Conan, or really giving us a depiction of a wounded Conan. This is a younger Conan. I believe he's in his 20s at this point in time. And he's been on the losing side of a battle. Effectively, he signed up with just the losing side. Some things you just can't pick a winner on, and that's where he was. He's injured, and he's in a field, and he's being collected by slavers. The slavers are gathering up all the wounded and the living and bringing them back so that they can, well, make some money off of the outcome of this battle. Conan has picked up and thrown into this group. There's a little bit of dialogue here with a bunch of characters, but as I said in the intro, I'm trying to avoid a lot of getting bogged down in the details. While he's with the slavers, he finds himself being tended to by a fairly major character, at least in the beginning of the book, and a little bit later, which is a friend of his. Now, hold on. I got to make sure I pronounce this correctly here because I've written this down. Bat Tan. There you go. B-A-H-T, Tan. Not B-H-A-T, the Thai currency. B-A-H-T. Entirely different. Bat is dealing with Conan and trying to mend his wounds because he's got some fairly major ones that he sustained in the battle. And the reason why he's doing this is because, well, he's just being a nice guy. Like, not everybody in the Hyborian Age is a complete douche canoe, so he's actually trying to do the right thing. They are on their way to a salt mine, and this is where they, as slaves, are basically going to be worked to death. This is described as a giant open pit area with guards that'll keep these slaves working, while they're basically kept in inhumane conditions, trying to produce the very salt that's paying for the overall operation. Now, I don't think the salt was the actual motivating factor in the initial battle, but it sure as heck is tied into this thing a fair amount. Now, I'll tell you, what's within here, though, is the escape plan and some really gruesome details that hit you very early in this story. And honestly, the first part, I was like, it's like, you're reading it and you're like, whoa. And the reason why is because at the bottom of this pit, there's a subsequent pit where they throw the bodies. And I don't just mean random bodies of, people they pick up off the field. I'm talking about the bodies of the slaves, the guards that might die on duty, basically everybody that's just going to get consumed by this salt mine. While they're working there, Conan's healing, Bot is becoming a friend of his, they're getting along, and Conan hatches a plan. He says, okay, I'm going to get out of here, but here's the deal, Bot. I need you to give me your rations, because although I've mostly healed, I am far too weak to pull off what I think I need to do here. And Bot's like, well, I got nothing else going on, so yeah, let's do that. And that's basically how the plan is hatched. And that's also a deal, because at this point in time, Bot is very clear. He's like, listen, I'll give you my meal. Bear in mind, giving away your meal of the small amount of nutrition you're getting as a slave of this particular situation is one that's really putting your life at risk. So Bot's taking a bit of a risk here. And he's like, okay, that's fine. Conan, here you go. Have my food. Conan eats the food, gets up, staggers forward a couple steps, and then just drops dead. Now, he's not actually dead. It's not that he's been poisoned by Bot's food or anything, but he has, feigned death. The reason why is because he wants to be thrown into this pit of death. And he's successful. He gets thrown into the pit of death. And it's really, really gross. Like the full-blown, gag you. Yeah, it's not good. The description here is really good as far as Tim's done, as far as writing what's occurring here. But for you as the reader, it's pretty darn gross. Conan makes his way out, kills one guard. I think he throws the guard's body in there, actually, at that point in time. Or does he not? I can't recollect. There's a detail in here where a guard's body gets thrown in there. I can't remember if it's one that he killed or it was a guard's body that was already there. Anyways, he's also disguising himself as a guard by taking the clothing. I think this actually was a guard that was already in there. He needed the clothing for that guard in order to pull off his plan. Anyways, he then has the guards accoutrement, let's call it that, and wanders in where the slaves are, kicks around Bot and says, no, you're coming with me, and basically just walks him out. It's a beautifully executed plan because it's got subterfuge in it, it's got adventure in it. He had to climb out of the pit, there's violence in it. Everything that you would typically expect from Conan is right there. Now hold on for a second. I need to take a sip here. Just the thought of that whole, a little bit of coffee is always a good thing to kill that. Let's just kill off the nausea here, shall we? Anyways, at this point in time, that particular scene cuts. Conan has entered into a deal. Bot has helped him. They have escaped. And they do actually go the extra step where they poison the well that the guards were drinking of, knowing full well the guards are going to get sick, and once they're weakened, the slaves will probably have a revolt, and all of their peers that are down in the salt mines will escape with them. It's a pretty cool plan. I like it. And you know what? He didn't have to go through the whole process of going back and helping them because, quite frankly, he was still weakened at this point in time and probably couldn't do it. That's probably the rationale as to why he didn't do it. Yeah, anyways, cut scene. Time now goes way forward, and we have an older Bot now, and he's actually a jewel miner, for lack of a better word, where he's hanging off cliffs on the far east side of Coralla. It depends how you're going to actually see this pronounced and spelled. In the story, it's called Coraja. And on my map over here, yeah, the giant map that's over me, it's actually Coraja as well, right? Yeah, Coraja. They're mining these jewels off the side of a cliff. And to do this, they're lowered down on ropes because he's joined a group of these miners and he's had a good life. He's got a wife, he's got 2 kids, things are going well. He's mining and hanging off the side, and then suddenly people start falling. And these are big cliffs, so people falling is bad. And what he's finding is that the ropes that these people are hanging off of are being cut. And he's like, well, that's not right. And he scampers up as fast as he can as the last of the ropes beside him is cut, and he makes it just to the edge of the cliff. And he's about to pull himself over when he feels his own rope being cut. And he grabs the cliff, and he clings to it feverishly, and finally makes his way over to find that a group of marauders has attacked the village and has cut all of these, and they're killing all the people, but they're going to take the rest of them alive. And he knows his wife and children are in this, so a former, warrior-type barbarian dude that hung out, heck, this guy was fighting battles before he met up with Conan, goes in there whole hog, actually ends up killing one of the marauders, if I remember correctly, and meets their leader. But the leader, he is convinced, because he's this massive dude, looks so much like Conan. He's like, Conan, I remember you. And he has a bit of a conversation with this guy before he realizes that's not Conan. But at this point in time, it's too late. He's tipped the scales. He's let this guy know that he knows Conan. And this guy is the wrong guy to know that you know Conan. It's a long, I know that you know sort of thing. It doesn't matter. He said that she said that she said, or that he said. He knows Conan. So the bottom line is that this individual is now like, oh, Conan, eh? And we'll get into this guy in a second. He ends up fighting Bot a little bit, ends up cutting off one of his hands, and then Bot ends up surviving by being pushed off a cliff with another one of the guards. But everybody sees him survive when he hits the river at the bottom, and they see him leave, and the leader says, oh, no, that guy knows Conan. We're staying right here. And also there was some financial gain to it, because this is the place where they were mining, and if he just keeps these people as slaves and makes them mine for him, he gets all the jewels that they mine. So kind of makes sense, right? Okay, so I think before we go further into the story and bring into this the massive figure that is King Conan, I think what we'll do is we'll talk about this leader of the bad guys. I think it's important to cover this now while it's still top of mind. So this guy's name is Grake. And Grake is it's an unfortunate name for a variety of reasons. And let me tell you, if you're like I am from Canada and you live in the GTA, let me tell you, Grake reminds you of another name that, quite frankly, but you're not too fond of just because his music sucks. Yeah, I just said that. Anyways, Grake's interesting because his whole motivation is all ego-based. But along the way, he has had some major wins to get here. So at the age of 9, he kills his own father, who was abusive, so you can kind of justify that. Or at least the author is suggesting you can kind of justify that, and that's why he did what he did. But then he goes off and goes down this really long and winding negative path, let's call it that. So at the age of 12, he joins up with a group of marauders that go and attack a bunch of people in Cathay, which is far to the east of the Sea of Vayet. And the reason why they're attacking them is because they're bringing them back and then selling them into slavery to slavers who are on the Sea of Vayet. Within a year, he kills 4 of his compatriots, ends up taking over these people, and continues along taking over this band of marauders. So he's moving his way up fairly rapidly. But something happens. At the age of 16, he finds himself beset by these they're described as simian creatures. And it's interesting because if you've got your Conan lore and you're thinking about the Sea of Vayet, you're already thinking, are these like these great mountain ape things? Is this like a thack? Is this like, what are we talking about here? I'm trying to grasp this. And you find out at the end of the day that these are actually almost like wraiths that are, I guess, the souls of the victims that they've been killing come back to kill all of the marauders. And they're quite successful. In fact, Drake only survives by running into some caves and heading into subterranean layers. And he spends over a year in this subterranean layer fighting all sorts of what are described as creatures beyond what you would find up on land. These are horrors that live down here that you would never suspect, including, I guess, even some ghosts and things. And after about a year, or during that year more correctly, he runs into a 3-armed wizard. Yeah, I know, a weird description. It's like the guy from Cyberforce with the robot arm that's underneath his existing arm. A 3-armed wizard that's thousands of years old who gives him this source of power and basically really quick rage, which is called Quetch, if I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Drake, after befriending this guy for years, says, well, the heck with this. I'm not just going to hang out down here. I'm going to go back up to the surface world, and I'm going to kick the crap out of everything. And really, his sole reason for existing is to make himself more and more of a pompous ass, really, to say, I am the greatest there ever has been, and I need to continue to kill the greatest that ever has been. So when this now barbarian leader of his band goes into Bot's village and finds out that Bot knows Conan, and also finds out that he's got possession of Bot's wife and children, and that Bot has survived and has left, is thinking, no, I can wait right here. Conan's coming to me. And he hatches the plan of literally doing exactly that, and that's just staying there. But as he's staying there, it also occurs to him after a little bit more thought, because while he's there, he's got time to pass. He's slaughtering random slaves in what he calls combat while he's taking this Quetch stuff. I guess he's addicted to it. Anyways, as he's there, he's thinking to himself, it would be really cool if I had some assistance. Now, this is an interesting point as well, because you got to think, Drake is a guy who lives off of his ego. So why is he now considering, well, I probably need some assistance? Is it because the word Conan is a little bit too much for you? Could be, because don't forget, at this point in time, Conan's older. That's what this whole story is all about. It's an old King Conan. He's been around for a while. People know of him. He's pretty darned impressive. And he thinks of a lady whose name is Mylera. Now, Mylera is another character that we're going to dive into right now before we get back to the whole Conan and how he draws into this. Because you need to understand who these bad guys are. Mylera is the daughter of a knight that served under Conan and who died defending Conan. But he died in a very particular way. Apparently, at some point in time in the past, King Conan has led a small expeditionary troop down into, is it Zamora? Yeah, Zamora. Because Zamora is having some problems with some pirates. And when they get there to fight, they find out that Zamorans don't just have problems with pirates. They have problems with pirates and giant sea monsters that have tentacles and crazy eyes. And they're described as being out of this world type stuff. And this knight dies in the process of, protecting Conan. And Mylera is very upset about this because in her mind, Conan never did her father honor and didn't even know her father's name. And this led her down a very negative path, similar to what Drake had, where she has now decided to reinvent herself. And in the process of heading further south and working in the sex trade industry and manipulating people through her sensuality and blah, blah, all sorts of language like that, she ends up running into Drake. And this is where Drake meets her when she's working effectively in the sex trade industry, while she's trying to hone her skills and reinvent herself as something different, because she wants to become something magical. And by manipulating people, she's working her way towards this. Drake actually, at some point in time in this whole conversation, realizes that he's actually afraid of Mylera and actually leaves her to go off on his own adventures. Bear in mind, this is probably him when he already had the Quetch, and it's pretty darn terrifying to begin with, and just leaves her. But he knows that she could probably be of assistance in this whole King Conan killing business. And she actually hated Conan because she told him about hating Conan and why. So he sends a hawk to get her. Now this is where, this hawk thing's really weird. I think we'll have to come back to that, though. But all you need to know is that a hawk is on its way to get Mylera, and now we're going to cut back to King Conan. So Conan comes into this story in actually a really interesting way, which kind of really makes you ask the question, is he actually just doing this because he made a deal? He's hanging around in Aquilonia, Tarantia, the capital of Aquilonia. He's bored out of his skull, and he and Zenobia have just had a conversation, and he's about to get jiggity. And I gotta tell you, he loves his wife. This is a King Conan that definitely wants to do this. And he's interrupted by one of his own people saying, "My liege, there's somebody who's come to visit you." And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "No. It's trust me. He really needs to see you. He's injured. He's with the I guess what you call a barber at that point in time." Yeah, I guess a barber or a medicine man with the leeches, and but it's really weird because he keeps calling you Conan instead of King Conan, and Conan's like, All right, hold on, Zenobia, I'll be right back. Wanders on off and heads in, and actually finds that it's actually Bot Tan. And when he's talking to him, initially he doesn't recognize him. And it's only after a couple moments when Bot is kind of in the process of recovering and becoming more coherent that he looks clearly in the eyes of Conan. And the two of them make eye contact, and suddenly memories come surging back to Conan from, I guess, 40 years earlier of, "Oh my God, Bot Tan, what are you doing here? And how did this happen?" And Bot tells him the story. And he also says, "But I need your help now because I need you to help me because I'm calling in that favor." And Conan, before the story is even over, is like, "Well, of course I'm going to pay off the favor, absolutely. But is it him just paying off the favor, or is he bored out of his mind?" I'm going to argue it's probably 80% favor and 20% bored out of his mind, but he decides, no, I am going to go and do this. And that's effectively how Conan gets roped into this. He disguises himself on up, says, "I'm heading out," says goodbye to his son, says goodbye to Zenobia, son who is not named, who we know, if we know our King Conan lore, is Prince Khan, or Conan Jr. We're going to call him Khan. Anyways, and goes heading off. And as he's heading off, he finds out after the first night, actually, he finds out really how bad he is at setting traps. Does manage to snare something, and as he's in the process of eating this, he finds that people are sneaking up on him. He actually gets the jump on them and finds out that it's 3 of his own guards sent by Zenobia to protect him, and he begrudgingly says, "Okay, fine, you guys can come with me." After 3 days of them traveling, there's a lot of threes here. After 3 days of them traveling, this is when weird things happening, because they're now coming out and they're heading into Ophir, which does not really have a great relationship with Aquilonia. So Conan says, "Well, I'm going to disguise myself." And it's only when he's entering into Ophir that we start to see the recurring message coming through the narrative from King Conan's mind, which is, "Holy crap, I am really terrified of Koremesh and Koth, and I'm terrified of what happened to me in the Scarlet Citadel. What I let loose there is probably really, really bad." Now, at this point in time, we're going to sidestep the story. What he set loose in the Scarlet Citadel is really a very interesting choice of words, because he didn't really set anything loose in the dungeons of the Scarlet Citadel, except for one person. That's a guy whose name is Peleus. Now, Peleus in the Scarlet Citadel is a phenomenally interesting character. For those of you who are listening to this podcast, if you're saying, "Tennessee Fats, can you tell me more about the Scarlet Citadel?" Oh my God, would I ever love to do that for you. The Scarlet Citadel is, in my mind, one of the greatest Robert E. Howard Conan stories ever, just because of the Eldritch level horror that he unlocked in those dungeons. Aside done, Conan is now talking about Peleus in his own mind. That's all I'm giving you on that one. Peleus is a super powerful wizard that he let loose, and Peleus was captured by a guy whose name is Soth Lanthe. It's Lanthe. It's almost impossible for me to pronounce these things correctly, but he's the bad guy that was in Scarlet Citadel. And at the end of it, when Conan cuts off Soth Lanthe's head, I'm saying it again wrong, it's actually Peleus in the form of a hawk who comes and gathers up the head and flies off with it, while the body, who is headless, now stands up chasing after it, and you now know Peleus has had his revenge. Conan is terrified of Peleus, which is very interesting because later in King Conan comics, and I'm talking about the original Marvel series, Peleus was actually his friend and helped him out. But in the end of Scarlet Citadel, there was always a sense in Conan's mind of, "Oh crap, what did I just let loose there?" And it's very interesting here that Conan, right off the bat, as soon as he's heading into Ophir, is immediately saying, "Oh crap, Koremesh is coming." That's bad news. I don't know why he would think of that right away. I have a theory about that, and we'll come back to that later in this podcast. Anyways, he knows he's 2 days away from Koth at this point in time. He's setting up camp, and just as he's setting up camp, he gets a smell, and a smell is actually a drug. I don't need to get into the drug's name. That sets him off and says, "People are coming." And he manages to let his 3 guards know just in time for when the surprise attack occurs. And this attack is devastating. Up until this point in time, King Conan, aged King Conan, has had a sense that he's going to pull this off and everything will be fine. But now, everybody dies. And I mean everybody dies. And I mean including the horses, everybody dies. His own horse that he chose, I think his name was Ella, they all die. Everything is killed. The wild men who attack them die. Everybody dies. And Conan takes a couple huge injuries to the midsection, and one in his guts and one on his hip, which actually almost took him down. But he does manage to survive, and just as he's delivering what he thinks is going to be the last blow, he passes out and comes to find himself lying over the form of a dying wild woman. So this is a pack of just crazy people that attacked. And he questions her and says, "Why did you attack me?" And she says quite clearly that she has to kill King Conan in order to get wealth beyond measure. Now, this is kind of an interesting point because Conan has been traveling incognito. In fact, he snuck out of Aquilonia with nobody knowing he's leaving. So how do these people know that he's here? Especially when he's in Ophir, which doesn't necessarily have the greatest relationship with Aquilonia. So he suddenly starts, oh, this is bad. Well, I better get out of here because, scavengers are going to be here soon. So he grabs as much stuff as he can and he heads off close to the river, the lake that was nearby, and starts bandaging himself up. And it's interesting, at this point in time, he's using some of his own wilderness lore and finding natural medicines to bandage himself up and heal himself as much as possible. And during this, he actually thinks of Olivia from way back in another Robert E. Howard story. What was that, Iron Shadows in the Moon? I think it was Iron Shadows in the Moon. And it's interesting in that he goes, it's amazing how memory just takes things away from you. We wash away from that Robert E. Howard lore quite easily. But we're going to keep coming back to that Scarlet Citadel one, let me tell you. And just as he's thinking, okay, I'm probably recovered, but I need to keep moving. I'm not going to give up on my quest. He hears some singing in the distance and decides, there's a group of bards. I'm going to go rob those crazy bastards. I'm going to take all their stuff and I'm going to continue on my quest. And literally he's in the process of jumping in front of these people who are hanging around a fire and demanding their horse at sword point while they're laughing at him, which you can't understand. And then he passes out. Yeah, kind of weird, right? Now, I know when I ramble on here, because it seems like we're going through just a typical Sentency Fats old man ramble, I'm not actually telling the story in a coherent way. But trust me, this is actually how the story occurs. And if you listen to these events, it sounds like, what? What is this, like an episode of Transformers? What's that? No. No, it's not an episode of Transformers. You now need to cut back to other characters, because there are other forces at play here that have led to a certain number of things occurring. And this is where Tim really shines, because he honestly does, because he has interwoven this web, this tapestry of character involvement that is so intense. Well, it's intense. I just need to stop there. Let's cut back to malaria. You will remember the last thing I mentioned was that Drake was a little concerned and said, I'm going to send off a hawk and get malaria because, this is Conan we're talking about here. And, even though I'm an egoist and I know I can take him on my own, I probably need some help. And then he's also thinking, and as soon as she finishes helping me, boy, am I going to murder the crap out of her too. Because he's a jerk. He really is. Anyways, malaria has received the note. But here's the thing. How? Honestly, the story of how she receives this note is this weird, winding thing. Because you think about it, Drake has no idea where malaria is. Why would he know where malaria is? He just left her in a brothel years previously. How would he know where she is now? That makes no sense. Does she have some sort of article of clothing that the hawk is using like a bloodhound to find her? I don't know. But the hawk goes off with a note tied to its leg, and it actually gets to her. And it gets to her in this weird way where the hawk actually dies. Its body parts are all sorts of harvested weird things. There's notes about how its feathers are used to tell stories, and it ends up in basically a storage area as a dried out hawk leg that's to be used for magical abilities in a priestess's, well, I wouldn't call it a hovel, a priestess's keep in Stygia. And it just so happens that this priestess, Belindra Zorn? Zorn? Did I hold on? Let's check. Zorn, yeah. Zarn. Belindra Zarn has sent off one of her pupils to head down there to get her some stuff because she's got to cast a spell. And this pupil, who just happens to, while she's there, look up and see a hawk leg and go, hey, there's something tied to that, and pulls it off and finds a note written to her from Drake saying, hey, come help me kill King Conan, because he's going to be in the cliffs of Karaja soon, and it would be a great time. And yeah, lots of fun. Yibbity yibbity. Now, I don't know if he mentioned there's going to be any sort of stooping involved. Not entirely sure. But Malera is like, oh, look, I got this note. Now, how that happened And how she got that actually ties into a theory that I'm going to come back to later when we're talking about the final take here. Because it really does reinforce one of the ones that I probably, it's a conspiracy theory, but you know what? I'm going to stick with it. Anyways, Malaria reads this and says, oh crap. Now, Malaria is actually terrified of Belindra Zorn, even though she's learning from Belindra Zorn, because Belindra Zorn is really, really powerful. But she knows that her whole purpose in life is to go kill King Conan. That's why she's doing what she's doing. So she heads on up to Belindra and says, listen, I got to go. And Belindra's like, why? And she says, well, I got to go kill King Conan. And she's like, why? All valid reasons. But again, Malaria knows lying to Belindra would be really, really, really bad, because she's just going to read her thoughts and then probably kill her anyways. She takes the time to explain, listen, here's what happened with my father. You know, these Eldritch level monsters came out of the ocean. And she's like, really? And creatures from beyond, you say? And creatures from beyond is the key term. And at this point in time, she, boom, shuts down in the conversation, which is really weird. And it's, again, tipping to another point, which I think will come later. She shuts down to this whole creatures of beyond thing and then tears off into her library or lab and says, ooh, because Malaria is in the middle of explaining, well, I got to go because, and she just stops. Like, you know when you're talking to somebody and they just stop listening, and you can tell because they've picked up their phone and they're doom scrolling, or their eyes have now looked over at the car across the road and they're asking, I wonder if the tank is full in that random vehicle. What color is that? You know when they've stopped listening. This is what Belindra is doing here. She goes tearing off and then comes back with this little vial, and the vial is full of a thing called Creor. And she gives this to Malaria and says, listen, I'm upset that you're leaving because, you know, you're going to corrupt all the knowledge I've given you, but, you know, creatures from beyond, and I'm probably not going to be able to stop you. So take this with you. It'll help you. And I'll warn you, the first one's going to scorch you or burn you. The second one will cripple you, and the third one will likely kill you. And those are the 3 drops that are within this little vial. And then she's still thinking, creatures from beyond. And Malara's like, oh, okay, so I'm going to go and do this. And she's like, so yeah, just bugger off, creatures from beyond. And she's still focusing on this creatures from beyond thing. And as she leaves, the last thing she hears Belindra say, as she's scouring through her library, pulling down a book, is, really? It all happened in Zingara, you say? Because, again, she's going down this creatures from beyond thing. Now, how does this relate to the tale that I've just told you? Well, I'll tell you how, because Malaria is now on her way to go and meet Grake, but she's got this Creor. And on her first night camping out, she lures somebody with, I guess, a promise of sex or something like that, ends up killing the guy and then roasting his brain over top of a fire. I know, it sounds pretty gross, but it's not as gross as that initial scene with the pit of... never mind. Roasting his brain over a pit of fire, and actually ends up using the first drop of Creor. And she's inhaling the Creor, and as she inhales the Creor, she feels her mind separating from her body, and she sees the world beyond our world. She's one step beyond. You know, people always say that, you know, we're just the veil of reality that we live in. It is what drips away when we die. This is what she's moved beyond now. She's seen beyond this, and she's zooming in on Conan, trying to figure out where he is. And she sees her mind flying through space and time to where King Conan is camping out with these 3 flunkies. But she's looking around saying, how do I kill him? Oh, there's a whole crowd of wild people over here that are high as a kite. Why don't I just manipulate them with the promise of wealth and they'll go kill King Conan? And then she's like, okay, I've done my job. Time for me to head on back to the body now. But as she's doing this, she has a very distinct sense that something in the cosmos is looking at her. Something above and beyond that lives in this world beyond our world is aware of what she's doing, and it's watching her head back. And she finds herself tearing back to her body with record speed, in a way afraid of this very cosmic entity that she's perceiving. And also wondering, I wonder if Belindra sees this. Like, is this a thing? Pretty scary stuff. And as she comes back, she starts to feel the scorch and the burn. And she's kicking and writhing in pain on the floor and ends up kicking a log in the fire that knocks over the skull that's full of boiling brains, which partially douses the fire. And the strange thing is, that's actually mostly what saves her life, I think. And there's actually a comment to that Tim writes in here that probably is what saves her. And it's rather interesting that this is what then started the Wild Man attack and was what led to the whole problem of why Conan is now injured and has now tried to take out an entire group of bards, and they're laughing at him. So it comes together. It's a tapestry, a very complex tapestry. Now I think, let's call it the seam the very stitching around the edge of this tapestry, which gives us the cohesiveness, that gives us the warm blanket of story that keeps us through this one. That's a beautiful analogy. Anyways, what happens here is that Malera wakes up the next day and she's scorched and she has a sense in her head. And for some reason, this voice keeps repeating in her mind that says, I will never kill Conan. And it's this self-doubt that now makes her do exactly what Greg did, where she goes, you know, if we get somebody else in here to help us, that would probably be a good thing. And again, I'm wondering why these characters have this sense of they need assistance, but it helps build this tapestry of the characters that then come into the culmination that is the end of the story. So I can understand why we're going here. As she's sitting there and she's thinking about this, suddenly one name jumps into her mind. And it's the one person in the universe that she is absolutely terrified of. And this is what brings us full circle back to Conan's initial comment of, man, I do not want to go to Koramesh and Koth, and by that's it's a whole Scarlet Citadel thing. And this is the fact that she now says, we need to bring in Crow Danaz. Now, Crow Danaz is a character that we only know from this story, and we only learn more about him as we get more of the story done. So what I'm going to do for you listening to this and you watching this is give you the scuttlebutt right now, because it's important for us to know this guy now. Crow Danaz is actually a disciple of Sotha Lanti, who was the bad guy that Conan lopped the head off in the Scarlet Citadel when Peleus came in hawk-like form and flew off with the head while Sotha Lanti ran off after it. Because Crow Danaz, after the fall of Peleus and the taking, sorry, not Peleus, of Sotha Lanti, and the taking over of the Scarlet Citadel by Peleus, was then left to wander the wilds alone. This is the worst possible thing you can do to an absolute psychopath who happens to be a necromancer. Because all sorts of bad happens. And I'm not talking bad to him. I mean, he's able to do all sorts of bad because there's now nothing keeping him in check. So while Conan's still unconscious and this group of bards is laughing at him, yeah, that's probably a good point. We'll dive into the Crow Danaz character here. So what does Crow Danaz do after Sotha Lanti is killed and you're wandering off in basically the rest of the world being a total necromantic psychopath? You just cause all sorts of hell. That's what you do. While he's meandering and traveling the world, he finds himself becoming more and more powerful. He's learning more and more things. And it's during these travels that he ends up meeting Malera to begin with. And Malera was terrified and takes off. And it was only just one conversation in a bar in one night, but it was enough to terrify Malera enough that she would remember him years later. During his ramblings and meanderings, he ends up finding his way into a massive 1,000-year-old dungeon-like keep, which the surface part of is just a couple walls, but he finds his way down into the dungeons themselves. And it's in these dungeons that he finds more and more power. Similar to what we saw with Grake going into his caves and learning more and more powerful things and coming out with his quetch. Crow Danaz has gone into these and has discovered the magic that was left over by the prior owner. And we're talking thousands of years prior. Like, we're talking about literally before the oceans drank Atlantis type Kull level, Thurian era type horror. And as he's there, though, he's becoming more and more of it, and it's becoming more and more of him. And what I mean is the demons that he's running into and the magic that he's running into while he's there ends up becoming a part of him. It makes him stronger, but it also drives him further. At one point in time, it's discovered that while he's sleeping, that the demons end up becoming tattoos on his skin, the very tattoos on his skin that write things out in languages that aren't even spoken at the time when this story takes place. Now, Hyborian age, these languages are already dead. And it's these moving tattoos that actually terrify Malera the most, because they confuse her the most, and they seem to change based on, well, who knows what. Kind of really weird stuff. While he's there, though, he's developing more and more of his necromantic skills. At a certain point in time, in the years while he's studying there, he ends up making monsters. And it's kind of funny that there's a description of all the things that he's trying to make, while he's, of course, slaughtering people and then bringing them back to life because he's practicing his necromancy, because he's actually convinced he wants to make himself immortal. He makes one, though, which is, I guess, the pièce de résistance of all of his pieces, which is a creature called Spidorel. Now, I think this is a very clever play on words, because the description is very much like a spider. But Spidorel is massive. It's this huge thing. And Crow Danaz can ride this. But at the same time, this thing has just been let loose into the lower dungeons just to thrive on its own, where it's killed off all the other monsters that Crow Danaz created. And it's just doing its thing. Well, he's hanging around one day, literally trying to, well, he's killing a slave and then bringing it back to life. Once again, practicing the whole necromancy thing. And he's telling his other slaves, you make sure you keep that blood warm because, and just as he's saying that, suddenly mind bats attack him. Now, mind bats, I think, are a lot of fun. Mind bats, in my mind, kind of give me an image or a visage of something like you would see in Frog Crisis with day bats. Because you know what? We all know they're there, but nobody talks about them. So these mind bats end up going into his head. And he's like, oh my goodness, I'm being targeted. Only people who know me could attack me with mind bats. And as he's trying to reel through this and fight his way through this, well, I'm tied in now. This is obviously somebody powerful. Not as powerful as me, mind you, because I'm an egoist, and quite frankly, but nobody could ever top what I can do. But he gives into it and finds, who is it that's here? I am going to murder you. And he sees Malera, and he's like, oh, I remember you. You're the chick from the bar. And she's like, yeah, I'm the chick from the bar, and you're the guy from the bar. Why? And she explains the whole thing. Hey, you know Conan, that guy? I'm going to go murder him on the cliffs in Coraja. Why don't you come along? It'll be a lot of fun. And he's like, why would I? And she says, listen, I've already told you that's enough. And she cuts the transmission and just meanders on off. That's it. And he's left sitting there thinking, killing Conan, eh? Now it has been years since Sotholanti has been killed by Conan with the winged creature and head and flying and headless body running. It's been a long time. But it's enough for him to remember. That's the guy that killed my... Ooh, Spidrell? And he calls up Spidrell, and Spidrell comes out of nowhere. And he's like, we are going to hunting. Kill everybody in here. Go slaughter all the slaves, because I don't want them to cause any trouble while we're gone. We're going to go kill Conan and have a good time, because of what he did to my master. And then we'll come back here and just keep doing what we're doing. Because you know what? If we're all dead, and I'm really that good at being a necromancer, I can just bring them all back. Sounds like a good plan. Spidrell just runs off and slaughters everyone. Well, Conan is thinking to himself, well, you know, I'll probably only want to travel by night because, you know, my skin hasn't really hit the sun in a long time. So I got time, so let's just, you know, do that. And that's really how Crodanaz now gets drawn into this overall epic. And that's the three bad guys that are the main ones that fall onto this. But now we need to get back to Conan's story, unconscious Conan, and starting to meet this Bard party. Because Bard party is actually the other side of this coin. You have one side, which is the bad guys. Let's go talk to the good guys. All right, so who the hell are these guys? Well, they're the very band of flunkies that were laughing at Conan while he was wounded and swinging a sword around a fire and passed out. Conan finds himself waking up amongst them, and they are tending to his wounds. And the first person that he sees is the individual named Kaz. Now, Kaz is a Pict. Bear in mind, Cimmerians and Picts, they don't get along. But this is an older King Conan. He's already gone through the adventures beyond the Black River. He's kind of and also I've gone through the Conan the Adventurer comic series, in which he actually got to know and partially befriend a Pict. So we're going to assume that's actual lore here and draw it in. And Kaz is magically working at his wounds and bringing him back, and there's fire around her hands. And that's really all you need to know about Kaz. There's also Jemmy. Jemmy is the leader of this group and is crippled, and she's the individual that has brought them all together. And she's the one that actually puts major decisions forward to the group that they then need to decide on as a group. Everybody within the group respects her, but Jemmy really is just an individual that has wisdom and a story and has brought them together to be what they are. She's kind of like the heart of this group. The next individual is named Fenric. Now, Fenric is kind of interesting because he's a Bosonian archer. So the Bosonian, what are they, swamps or mountains? Hold on, let me look at that thing. Actually, it isn't even on the map. Anyways, it's a region within Aquilonia, and these are the big kick-ass archers that live in the Aquilonia army. And Fenric is one of them. And Fenric has actually served as an archer under King Conan and is now retired. You then have Tathor. Now, Tathor, literally the most interesting person within this group. Probably the least amount we learn about him, but holy crap. We'll come back to him. All you need to know about him right now is he's Stygian. Then you get Alimaro, who is a former pirate, female, wears a face mask because she is horribly disfigured because of what her own people did to her. That's really interesting sort of thing. And then you get Ganar. Now, Ganar, he's from the north, like Conan. Massive dude. And all you really need to know about him is he wears a trophy necklace of, well, certain organs that he's harvesting where he's killing off an entire band of bad guys over time. What's happened with this group, though, is they've all gotten together and they've decided that they are now retired in the ways of violence. Obviously very seasoned warriors, with the exception of Jemmy. But they've all decided they're done with it. They've experienced enough of it. And now Jemmy has brought them together through her travels to be this traveling group of performers where they sing songs of the dead. Hence, Songs of the Slain being the title of the book. Effectively what they do is they sit around all day with their musical instruments, writing songs. This is, by the way, for those of you watching the YouTuber, this is me pretending to play a harp, because clearly that's how you do that, because my fingers are just randomly swinging through the air. You know, they call them fingers, but I've never seen them fing. Classic Simpsons. Anyways, they do this, but they write lyrics about songs that they will perform, but the people they perform about are only those who are already dead. But as they're traveling, they're learning more, and this is the life that they're creating for themselves, a life of peace. Conan recognizes, holy crap, I'm injured. And over time starts going through the process of learning each of the stories of these individuals. And they all call it, you probably want to know my story, when they're telling it to Conan. And some of these are really tragic. Like, they really are. And I don't want to spoil them, so we're not going to go into them, except for one. Because, as I say, Tathor is pretty darned important. Anyways, as he's learning about them, and he's also learning how good they are at doing what they do, he also learns about their violent past. And he says, hey, I'll make you guys a deal. I'm King Conan, as you well know, because I'm so cool. Singing my songs when I'm dead is literally the ultimate prize. How about I tell you my stories, and you guys help me get all the way to the far end of Karaja, in disguise, incognito. And when we're done, you guys go your way, I go my way, everybody's happy. Now, Conan in the back of his mind knows, okay, although these guys have disavowed any form of violence, I know they will come to my aid. I can convince them to help me and be fighters when I get there. This is my evil plan, because you know what? I'm going to manipulate them. In the meantime, they're like, man, we are going to get the living crap out of these stories out of Conan. They're thinking about manipulating him, but it's all unspoken. It's actually all unwritten. You can only figure that out when you start reading through their actions in the tale. And over time, he does learn more about them. But, as I said, the most important one is Tathor. Now, Tathor, I'm going to give you guys a little bit on, because this leads directly into a major theory that I have at the end of this one. Tathor is a Stygian, and he is very interesting because he also is marked. He also is attempting to forget, and he's attempting to get away. Tathor was the captain of a military contingent in Stygia and had to be drawn to the ocean with his contingent to fight off, wait for it, Eldritch-level monsters, cosmic horrors, that would drive a man mad just to see them, led by some sort of underwater sea hag. And almost his entire contingent is killed by these monsters, and it's him that takes down the sea hag. But what he saw during that battle has psychologically scarred him. But the second and the most important part of that battle, which has scarred him even more, is he knows that the cosmic magic that was behind that hag saw him. Yeah, I just said that. Saw him. He knows that that will be his death because it knows he killed the hag. It's coming for him, and he knows that will be his end. It is a fascinating thing because guess what? We had Conan go down into Zingara to fight off Eldritch-level monsters. Those are the ones that Mylara is so upset with Conan about. And you have Eldritch-level, cosmic-level monsters that can see down through the veil behind reality in Mylara when she's using the Creor. It's all starting to come together, isn't it? Yeah, this Tathor guy, pretty darned interesting. And again, this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying there is a tapestry here. Trust me, it's rich. So this is the point in time where I'm actually going to divorce myself from the story. This is where I'm going to walk back and I'm going to say, you know what, from here on in, it's on you. Because I've talked about the tapestry, I've talked about the beautiful interweaving here, and quite frankly put, I've also talked about the fact that I don't want to get bogged down in details. The story actually is one now where effectively this group, this adventuring party that are heading forth, you must gather your party before you venture forth. They have decided to head off to Karaja, and on the way they have two major combats. One is caused by Mylara, the second one is caused by Crow Danaz. Actually, no, it was Crow Danaz. And at the end of the day, Conan ends up being captured. And actually, at one point in time, you think the majority of the adventuring party is slaughtered. And it's only in the cataclysmic battle at the end, where Conan is now in Coraja, in front of the Grake and the Mylera and the Crow-Denaz, that really you see that these three bad guys who are all looking out for their own best interests are not working well as a unit. Conan has a very easy time separating them, and when the rest of the party shows up, they also do the same thing. Where Conan and his adventuring party work as a team, these three idiots don't. And at the end of the day, you end up with the two magic users dead very early in this one. Conan heavily injured. And as a result of Crow-Denaz dying, Spitterell is, well, a problem. And Grake actually ends up fighting with Conan to help take down Spitterell, and is unfortunately slaughtered at the end of the day with a Spitterell. I'm not even going to go into it. It happens. It is a cataclysmic and beautiful story. I think it's really, really well done. But that's how the tale ends. Really, all I wanted to walk through here was who's in it, give you all the deets, and get to the end of this thing. So now we get into the next part. We'll jump into themes. I know, that was really quick wrap-up. I know, it is. But this is the thing. Read it. Like, for crying out loud, read it. I'm just wetting your whistle here. We'll talk about the themes, we'll talk about archaic language, and then we'll talk about my thoughts. Yeah. Okay, part 3. Themes. There are a lot in here, actually. There are a lot of major themes, and then there's very subtle themes along the way. But I'm going to stick through here because I'm going to get into the conspiracy theories later, so I don't want to layer them in on the themes. We're just going to stick with some of the really big ones in here. I think one of the major themes that goes through this whole story is Conan dealing with recognizing really diminished capacity and his age. And this is one of these things where is it man versus nature? Is it man versus the inevitability of his own death? Is it a psychological growth issue? There's a lot of things you could really draw into this. But I think in the biggest sense, that really is what it is. For Conan, as he's going through this, when he discovers early that, oh geez, I'm having a really hard time making a trap. He's in the middle of a battle where he's talking about the wild men and he gets injured and he's cursing himself out for his own stupidity and his own, well, I guess, lack of ability when he's fighting these people off. Later on, it's him recognizing, I do need help from this group of idiots and I do need their assistance, and it's accepting that, and then getting to the end where he's like, ooh, I guess the best way I could do is probably divide these guys up and take them down one at a time, because he knows at that point, or at least in his mind, that his band of idiots is gone. So he's recognizing, well, I have diminished capacity. I guess the best way for us to do this is allow you guys to carry me there so I can conserve my strength, so I'll be at my best when I'm there, having no sense of what's going to happen when he is there. And again, if you read through the whole thing, you'll see that. It's a major growth story for the character that is King Conan. It's also a major growth story for the King Conan at the beginning to recognize, I am going off on this adventure, and yes, I am covered in scars, and yes, look at what my past has done to me, but also look at what my past has brought for me. Because he's recognizing the value in the things he's learned, particularly when he's trying to use his own, I guess, wilderness lore to try to bring the injuries that he's received down to something that's manageable, just by picking up things at a random lakeside. Pretty interesting stuff. Another major theme that comes in on this one is really the concept of what is actual power and strength. If you think about it, what you saw here in these characters, particularly when, as I've showcased the bad guys, you have Grake and Crow-Denaz and Mylera, who all started their paths individually as people who were just normal folks. In the case of Crow-Denaz, you've got a guy who was learning from somebody who was really powerful, learned a couple things, then I guess that had to stop, but then went through his adventures, and it was only when he discovered something that could help him, i.e. this giant subterranean lair, that he became more and more powerful. Mylera, in recognizing I need to reinvent myself, left everything behind, started to manipulate all sorts of sexuality and things, and ended up making her way all the way down into Stygia, where she was learning from somebody else to become more powerful, and ended up becoming that powerful over-the-top creature that was built up from just a normal child. And the last person being Grake, you got a normal child at the age of 9 who was being abused, who worked his way out of that and then up into this massive situation, again, through knowledge achieved through a subterranean layer and some level of magic, all three of them having the magic to make them stronger. And at the end of the day, all three of them being over the top with that. with the overt and the blatant use of their power, which is how they exposed and used their power. But it was the group of idiots in Conan that actually took them down. The group of idiots that have given up on the idea of overt power, and they'll only use it when they're pushed or when necessary. And King Conan, just a regular guy who's in his 60s. Granted, he's got superhuman type abilities. It's probably some sort of weird mutant in the Hyborian age. But none of them were over the top and blatant and overt with, oh, this is what we're in, and bullying. It's really to that point. So what is really power? Is that strength something that's inside, or is it something that's shown on the outside? Clearly the author has given us the message. Outside strength is the failing point, and inside strength is really where it's at. And that is really interesting stuff. And I think really those are the two big ones that come out of this. There are a lot of other smaller themes, but I mean, if you were to say to me, Tennessee Fats, what is the key takeaway themes in here? I think it really is the aging of Conan in this one that really just sort of makes you go, ooh, that's heavy. Yeah. All right, part 4, archaic language. There isn't any. Yeah, this is actually a modern book, and it's a modern book written with modern lingo, and I didn't find anything in here that would say, well, that's archaic. I mean, use of the names, the name's legitimately archaic. References back to other Robert E. Howard stories. Yeah, if you haven't read Robert E. Howard, I could see, Scarlet Citadel and Sothalanthe. Did I get it right that? Who knows? I could see those being things that be like, wow, that's somewhat archaic. But those aren't words. Those are just names of things. And if you know, you know. It's not something you don't know because humanity has forgotten it. Okay, last part 5 here. What did I think of this? And really, what are my final thoughts? And then suggested further readings. What did I think of this? I really enjoyed this book. And it's funny because, I've read other Conan stories. I've read other adventuring stories. Recently, we just did that one, which was a Gail Simone Red Sonja story. First time I've actually read a Red Sonja narrative. And I really enjoyed that too. And in that, there were some very interesting themes. And I think there was beautiful layering within that. This one, however, is one that really, it hit me on a deeply personal level. And I think this is one of the reasons why I liked it as much as I did. Because in here, as I mentioned, Conan's getting old. He's recognizing his age. I'm old. I'm starting to recognize my age. This is something that speaks to me. And Tim did a wonderful job of making this King Conan character, which, again, we're talking about Conan here. This is a lofty goal that most of us would never achieve physically, mentally, endurance-wise, blah, 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 all those words. We'd never get there. But because he's now King Conan and aged, and I did just say aged, he's now more relatable. And it's this wonderful thing where you get a sense of, oh, I'm starting to get it now. And like I look at my own hands, which are now becoming more arthritic with age, and I'm like, I understand why Conan feels, a little bit of strain when he's gripping that sword now. I understand why he has a hard time doing what he used to do so easily. And to me, that's something that really speaks. And this over-the-top adventure he had to go on is great. But at the same time, it leaves you going, oh, that poor bugger. It's really quite a thing. Okay, so beyond the personal connection with me, though, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed in this story is the fact that it has left me with Hyborian age conspiracy theories like you wouldn't believe. And there are 3 big ones that jumped out on me on this one. And you got to bear with me here. As a guy who goes crazy for Hyborian age conspiracy theories, because my old man OCD brain is constantly looking for new things to fixate on, this book did a wonderful job. Here's the first one that jumps out at me. And the first one is the fact that for some reason in this world, things that are subterranean or below grade seem to be a source of power. And it's not just that they're a source of power. It's a source of ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge, and something beyond what we know now. And this comes forward, and it's evidenced in the story by 2 main characters. The one being Crow Denaz, who discovered this thousands of year old subterranean layer that gave him power beyond power, knowledge beyond any level of knowledge he had from his surface adventures. And I think that is something where you go, oh, okay. And it really does speak to the fact that it's old. The reason why it's got as much to it is the age and the experience that it has had. And it's imbuing him with that. You also saw it in the form of Grake. And Grake, who is escaping basically wraiths of his own making by escaping into caverns and caves. And while he's there, he's now beset by other things where he has to become more than what he is just to survive it. But within that, there's also the exposure to this 3-armed wizard that gives him the quetch. which gives him all of his power later, which is the entire vehicle for his ego and why he thinks he should go above and beyond what he normally is. And that is a major one. And it makes me wonder, okay, are we seeing this as a common theme? Is this something that I should be looking for more when I'm looking at Hyborian Age stuff? You go subterranean and suddenly you run into this stuff? I wonder. And that's one that just sort of makes me go, that's a pretty minor one. But it leads into the second major conspiracy theory that I come out of this one with. And this is a big one, which is, what the hell is going on cosmically here? If you think about it, you've got a lot of really weird statistical anomalies here. You've got Conan's pirate adventure where he's battling these creatures from beyond, these Eldritch level monsters. Okay, so you got one guy that's had exposure to it. You got Tathor in Stygia, very far from Zingara, fighting off Eldritch level horror creatures, who runs into and meets Conan. You have the child that was created out of the very trauma that was the result of the first one, now going off and meeting with Belindra Zorn. And Belindra Zorn immediately, as soon as Creatures from Beyond is discussed, immediately shuts down in conversation and goes down some deep rabbit hole. Like, we're talking about Gandalf sitting here and staring at a fire, puffing on this, going, while he's contemplating the Ring of Power here, where he's tapping into knowledge that he does not have. And this is what Belindra is going through. And then on top of all that, Belindra gives Mylera the Creor, which allows her to go beyond and outside of the world that we live in, where she is now exposed to these cosmic things that now see her. They see her. They saw Tathor. And they are manipulating the world that's in for these four entities to come into contact at one point in time, in a world with no interwebs, no roads, no nothing. Conan had to travel 900 miles to get to Coraja. That's far. Tathor came all the way from Stygia, which is even farther. Like, this is some major statistical, really? What are the odds sort of things? And it makes you think, So my theory is this, at least with regards to this cosmic thing. I believe that Tim is building up something here, which we're going to see in subsequent work. Whether that's just the plan in Tim's mind, or that's the plan overall with the publisher here, I'm not sure. But I believe that this whole cosmic level, things beyond our realm, feeding into and observing what we do, they are manipulating the situation. And I believe that they are manipulating the situation and trying to have something occur here. The fact that Conan has survived this probably is not to their liking. The fact that Tathor is one of the band of flunkies that survives to the very end of this is like, really? Because at the end of this, you don't have all of them. I mean, Mylera is dead. But Belindra, Conan, and Tathor, all there, all aware of this. This is an excellent setup for something else coming later. And it's perfectly juxtaposed against the fact that this is happening above, outside of the world of man, cosmic horror looking down. But at the same time, you have Drake and Crow Danaz getting very horrific knowledge and abilities coming up from below ground. It's like this realm of man is in the middle, and it's sandwiched between two horrible, horrible things. Now, the last one in here, this is the last, and again, what's going to come of that, I don't know. But the last conspiracy theory, and this is the one that really makes me excited and made this book just jump off the page to me. I don't think Peleus was out of this one at all. I think behind the scenes the entire time, you had Conan thinking of Peleus right at the beginning because Peleus wanted him to. Peleus was behind the scenes watching this entire thing and orchestrating the whole thing. Hear me out. Conan's on his way out of Ophir. And the first thing he thinks is, man, I'm looking for Scarlet. That's not, ooh. And this is a thought that comes back to him repeatedly. Why would he have thought that? And the fact that he thought that, and then it then immediately ties into later the fact that we're running into a disciple of Sotholanti, makes you go, Bear in mind, Peleus is really pissed with Sotholanti for trapping him in the dungeon under the Scarlet Citadel to begin with. So killing him might not have been enough. At the end of this story, and again, I'm going to let this one go a little bit. I've already told you everybody dies. Crow Danaz, his head is separated from his body. They both go falling off a cliff. And at the end of it, Flamed wings are seen around them as they rise up and fly off. How is Sotholanthi's head collected on a winged creature that was Peleus flying off? All of these things tell me that Peleus was seriously manipulating and behind the scenes the whole damn time, because he's the one that collected Crodan as his body at the end of this thing. He's the one that let Conan know very early, listen, you need to be aware you're going to be hitting necromancers later on. Because at the end of this, when Conan does actually meet up with all three of them, and he's looking at the necromancer, the first thing he thinks of is, Sotholanthi, eh? Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, I killed the heck out of him. It's all sitting there behind the scenes. I know it's a conspiracy theory. I know there's nothing in here that actually states it other than just looking at the symptoms behind it, but it kind of speaks to me. All right, so let's wrap this one up now with further reading suggestions. Well, I tell you, I mauled about this one a fair amount, and I'm still mauling about it now, but I did write down two of them. One of the major things that comes out of this story is Conan in an adventuring party. And I think this one was done really, really well. As far as, and the reason why I think this one was done really, really well is because Conan clearly recognizes he needs the aid. And it's not just something, okay, I've been stuck with these idiots and I got to work with them. It's, I recognize these are something I need. Ergo, I'm going to continue to just move along with this group. And that is a real interesting thing. And the only other thing that I could think of recently that jumps out to this one is the other recent book that came out. And this one was called, what is it? Cult of the Obsidian Moon. Now that one was, I tell you honestly, from the Conan fans that I know, was not received as well as this one. And in fact, one of them, it's funny, one of them actually refers to it as Conan the Babysitter, which is actually a really funny reference, because that actually is how Arnold Schwarzenegger referred to this movie when they were filming it, which is Conan the Destroyer. I would just pointed to a poster behind me for those of you who are watching the podcast. Listening to the podcast. Because in that one, he felt like all Conan was doing was following around this twit of a princess, and it was just really annoying. It was much less of an adventure in his mind. I think the actress in that was actually 14 when they recorded that. And that's just, yeah, that's food for thought. Anyways, that story is one that has, again, detractors, protractors. At the end of the protractors, as in the compass, that is one that does have Conan as part of an adventuring party. And that, I think, is similar to this in a way. And Conan is working within that group. And in that, you also have Eldritch level horror in the background in a so much more overt manner than what we see is in here. So that's another one I would suggest. Another one, though, that came to mind, though, and this is one that isn't necessarily Conan related, but it is related in that it's very much a story of an Eldritch level monster or god becoming awakened and becoming aware within the story. And I really got a feel for this, particularly when Mylara was going through her first out-of-body experience, when she suddenly became aware over just a very few paragraphs of the fact that something was watching her. And that's Clifford Ball's The Goddess Awakens, which is just one of his short stories. And in that one, you have, well, a goddess awakening. But again, you have this sense of an Eldritch level thing suddenly coming to and being aware of you and the horror that goes with that. Not so much the level we saw here, but again, it's one that I would suggest if that's something you like to probably get into that. Other than that, if you like the cosmic level behind the scene horror that was in this, Lovecraft all day long. I would strongly encourage that because it just fits so well here. Now, those are the only things that I could think of. If any of you can think of thoughts as to, well, this is a suggested one, maybe you should have suggested this, post a comment, let me know. Anyways, let's wrap this bad boy up. Well, everybody, that brings us to the end of the Tennessee Fats Library Podcast, episode number 6. Wow, there's a lot of talking in this one. But at the end of the day, I kept it a little bit less of reading and a little bit more of focusing on really just rambling through the story as it was. I didn't go into too much detail within the actual story. I gave you all the characters, the setup, and I got you to the midpoint and then just summarize the rest, because really it's not the purpose of these podcasts to steal the thunder of the authors. It's to give you guys more of a sense of my thoughts at the end of this and how I got there, and maybe you agree or disagree as we go. But at the same time, it also gives you a nice vignette of what's the story like overall, and then you could choose to read it if you haven't read it as of yet. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this one. Well, I guess if you're watching this online, we'll see you in the next one, which is normally my line on the other video, other channel. But if you're listening to this on the podcast, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you do, If there's some sort of function for you to like or post a comment, for crying out loud, just consider doing that, because I got to tell you, it's one of those things that makes me think, oh, people are actually listening to these things. That's cool.